Hi, Peter. Such a pleasure to meet you. So could you just kick off with a brief introduction to Firebird, just give people an idea of what they can expect if they watch your film, but also tell us what drew you to Sergei's story and made you think it would work on the big screen.
Firebird is a forbidden love story set in the Soviet Air Force in Soviet-occupied Estonia at the height of the Cold War, when a young conscript played by Tom falls in love with a fighter pilot, and their love story through the years. Well, when I read the story, I was really deeply moved. I actually cried at home, and I was like, how could this have happened? Like, it was almost unbelievable that how could this kind of a story have taken place at the time and place in the 1970s. And it was also just deeply moving, beautiful and tragic story. So we started researching and actually had the pleasure of meeting real Sergei and really almost seeing this whole new subculture that existed and has always existed. People have always fallen in love and done their best despite the political system of the time.
And obviously you've had, experience in non-fiction films. Did you ever consider doing a non-fiction film rather than a feature? And what might be some of the challenges and possibilities of telling a true story? Did you feel any pressure?
Well, I never really thought of it as a documentary. I think I was ready and looking for my first feature, and I really felt that this story can be told more powerfully as a feature, because you have a bit of a creative license as a filmmaker. Meeting Sergei in real life was an amazing asset for us to really spend 3 days with him, interview him for hours and hours, ask how did they behave, what did they do, what kind of food did they like, what kind of music would they listen to, and then definitely gave this really strong sense of responsibility, of really taking somebody's life story to the screen and staying as true to it, which I trust and feel we did.
And tell us about your cast, in particular right at the centre, Oleg and Tom Pryor, who actually came on board also as a co-writer, co-collaborator. So talk about working with them.
Well, we were actually introduced with Tom back in 2014 by a mutual friend, a film producer from Los Angeles. And we shot 2 scenes, mostly to prove to the financiers that I can direct. And then Tom started to make some suggestions of how to improve it and how to make some dialogues better and situations. And we ended up actually writing together for 2 years, which was amazing because he brought a totally new perspective to the story. And then when we were ready, we started casting worldwide. We got about 2,500 submissions for the lead roles and did months of auditions, but still hadn't found the right feeling, Roman, until one day Oleg walked in the room and we're like, okay, that's him, except for one thing, that he didn't speak pretty much almost any English at the time, so he had to learn in about 3 and 4 months to really perform in English.
And, people, as you said at the beginning, might be surprised that this kind of LGBT story did exist back in that time, under those conditions. So why do you think it's important, perhaps, to give a platform to these stories, to unearth these stories from the past and, improve representation on screen for LGBT people?
I think things are pretty well, not good, but pretty well in the UK and in the Western world, but there's still a lot to do in most of the world. And it's really, for me, it's saddening deeply to see that there are so many countries still where LGBT families are discriminated, illegal, or even punished by death. And I think the least we can do as filmmakers or as an audience is to really create more awareness, create more empathy, and by, I think, lending our time and attention, we can help and support these communities and these societies to become more open and more accepting of everybody. Because at the end of the day, why shouldn't anybody be allowed to love the person that they choose to love?
And obviously you made this film a while ago, and you could never have predicted the increased resonance of what's happening politically now with Russia, with Ukraine. So what does it mean to you that it's being released at this moment? And I believe Oleg, in fact, can't be here tonight because he's in Ukraine.
Well, when we made the film, real Sergei had one request: please make this film about love, not politics. And that's what we really did our best, and we never foresaw that what would happen in the world really that's been going on for the last 2 months. And it does make it even more relevant. And I think this story from the 1970s Soviet-occupied Estonia almost illustrates what's going on again as a repetitive cycle of violence. And the communities in both Ukraine and Russia are under tremendous pressure at the moment. I know a lot of people who also have escaped Russia because activists are being arrested and literally cleaned up, as they say. So it's it's important to really do something about it. And I think that's why we also partnered up with All Out as an organization that helps at the moment Ukrainian LGBT refugees and provide support to them. So we hope that through this film we can also create a bit more support and awareness.
And it can also have a message of love as well, love conquering other things.
Well, that's the most important thing at the moment, and I think always. And it's tough to actually get it across in countries where the media is not free and where people are not allowed to speak freely. But if we all do a little bit, I think we can change a lot. Pretty amazing. I was quite nervous today, honestly. It's been years, more precisely about 7 years in the making, and to be able to bring it to so many cinemas in the UK this weekend was just amazing. Well, the story is really what captivated me, and that's why I felt I have to turn his autobiography into film. It's just such a tragic and such a simple and at the same time really beautiful human forbidden love story. And the cast, I couldn't honestly imagine a better cast than Tom and Oleg and Diana to bring it to life. Actually, initially with the intention of Tom playing the lead of Sergei, but then we shot 2 scenes, mostly to prove that I can actually direct a film. And then he started to make some suggestions of how to improve certain dialogues and certain scenes, and we ended up co-writing for 2 years. So it's been a very collaborative process, really, of creating this story and film. I think it's very important. I think it is really, really critical that even at these dark times we don't fight violence with violence, that we really focus on love and focus on everyone's right to live as they decide to live freely, everyone's right to love whom they decide to love. And I think it's really saddening, and it's really, for me, like horrifying how in this day and age we have countries like Hungary, like Poland with their LGBT-free cities, like even the state of Florida recently introducing similar let's say quote-unquote propaganda laws like Russia. It's a lot of work to do, and I think it's important to tell such stories to bring more awareness to it. I think the most important things that our political systems need to change, because it's really up to the politicians and then the state-controlled media in many of these authoritarian countries, which, I mean, honestly speaking, brainwash people. So once people wake up and change their politicians, then most of the societies will change. It's almost like this chicken and an egg situation for me. But most important, what we can do is really not be okay with it, and not be okay with systems that discriminate and that still have even death penalties for same-sex couples in many countries. So I think one thing that we can do here in the West, I would think he would make an amazing James Bond. Well, I think it's first of all a really important story because of the type of story and the place and time. But I think most importantly, in light of what's been going on, especially the last 2 months in Ukraine, it's important to really remind ourselves that love is love and everybody has the right to love themselves similar, like everybody has the right to their freedom and to live as they wish to live, and I think the communities in Ukraine and Russia are under especially strong stress at the moment. So it's good to lend some awareness and some support and some love to it. Well, we were actually introduced with Tom probably at the end of 2014 when I had the first draft of the screenplay, and he has this, well, for me, for the first moment, he embodies the character. So he has this really nuanced performance, this feeling, really, that's very much in the way he composes himself rather than just speech. And I think that's really an amazing quality of an actor, to be able to give a performance in small nuances. And that's what we really looked at for the whole cast, because at the time and the place in the 1970s in Soviet-occupied Estonia, there was no such language. If you were part of the LGBTIQ community, you would face 5 years in a hard labor camp in Siberia. So people communicated most of his looks and body language rather than discussing about their sexuality. We got about 2,500 audition tapes. So we did months of auditions here in London. We got tapes from Berlin, from Australia, from all over. And finally, we had an audition when Oleg walked into the room. And we met so many amazing actors, but none of them felt right. It's almost impossible to describe it, but when he walked in, it was like, this is from both of us and our casting director. The only problem was that he didn't speak almost a word of English. So he had to work really hard for about 3 months to be able to do the role. And I think he did an amazing job. It's really sad that he can't be with us today, because he's actually a Ukrainian and he's in Kiev defending the city at the moment. Well, considering it's my feature debut, it's pretty amazing. I think it's beyond wildest dreams that we are getting such a wide release in the UK and also hundreds of cinemas in the US. So it's humbling, and I'm just really grateful to the whole team who made it happen. So I hope people resonate with the story. I hope people resonate with the story and go and see it in cinemas this weekend.